All right. Welcome, everybody. This is our 10th presentation in the fall lecture series. Thank you very much for coming. And let me just give the required announcement to please silence your cell phones, if you would. I have a few other announcements to make before I introduce our speaker today. The first is that this coming Thursday on December 1st, the LRCCS Distinguished Visitor Lecture Series will present David Shambaugh, Professor of Political Science and International Affairs at George Washington University, who's going to be speaking on from America's presidential election to China's 19th Party Congress, where do U.S.-China relations go from here? So that's going to be at 4 o'clock in the Annenberg Auditorium at the Ford School of Public Policy. That should be very interesting. Please also note that the LRCCS film series presentation of Night Scene by Cui En will be screened this coming Friday, December 2nd at 7 at the Krauss Auditorium of the Natural Science Building. I think there are flyers for a lot of these things over here. Also on Monday, December 5th, the same film series will have All Eyes and Ears, a 2015 documentary by Vanessa Hope. And that's going to be screened at 6 in the Stern Auditorium at the U of M Museum of Art. And the director will be there to introduce the film. Finally, the next noon lecture presentation will be given by Avery Goldstein, David M. Knott, Professor of Global Politics and International Relations, University of Pennsylvania, who will be speaking on China's security concerns, the enduring link between external and internal challenges. So that's a good segue. I think speaking of security concerns, we have this kind of alarming image here on the screen, which is the topic of our talk today, Buddhism and violence and religion, East Asian perspectives. So let me just introduce our speaker, Professor Chen Jinhua, who's a professor of East Asian Buddhism at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. He's a historian of religion who has done most of his work on the Tang Dynasty, Buddhism in the Tang Dynasty, but he has an incredible range of specialization. So not only Chinese Buddhism, but also Japanese Buddhism and Korean Buddhism. He has been at UBC since 2001, and since then has been, I think, astoundingly productive is the only way to put it. Has published 6 books on a variety of topics, co-edited another 6 books. By my count, I think he's up to 60 articles and chapters and has organized about 20 conferences in that time, and is now presiding over a multi-year, multi-million-dollar research project on religion in East Asia. So he's really been a powerhouse of productivity and organization for the field of Buddhist studies and Chinese studies. So it's a great honor to have him here with us. So without further ado, let me just invite him up here to begin his talk, Violence and Religion, East Asian Perspectives.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. And it's my honor to be here. Also, maybe my topic here is not so pleasant. But this is it's not a kind of my book project. So it's very broad. So I'm trying to present a few chapters. So I didn't know it is going to be such a huge turnout. So I got a little. But this talk was originally prepared for very journal audience. So maybe for many of you, it's probably going to be quite boring. So and it's lunchtime, so I can fully understand if you fall into sleep. So also, I need to caution that the title also a little bit misleading. It's actually not so much on. It's only mainly about Buddhism and violence, and this mainly is in the context of China. But of course, I will first make frequent reference to other East Asian countries. Okay, so let me turn to, this is maybe a kind of very brief introductions. This is a kind of challenges on the Buddhism's images of the so-called non-violence religions. As I believe that this is now is going, more people now has realized that this is now a kind of the myth. But the reasons why Buddhism has so widely and also so frequently refers to as non-violence religions, I think that we mainly have 4 reasons. Of course, the first reasons is because of the central and maybe also the most important principles in Buddhism on non-violence. Because according to many Buddhist texts, and the Buddhas always prohibit violence, right? Not only is that you cannot resort to violence, but even that you cannot witness violence. The second reasons I think maybe is because of the Buddhism's lack of a kind of global network of church, a kind of Buddhist church. So this lack of united and powerful global or maybe ecumenical churches has made Buddhism difficult to stage its kind of cross-regional warfare against other religions, right? So this is the second reason. The third reason, maybe this is kind of the result of the promotions that many Western Buddhist converts has been so diligently engaged in over the past few decades on a kind of to try to beautify Buddhism as a purely rational, peaceful, ascetic, and even the democratic religions. But of course, as many of you know, that this is now must be taken with great reservations. Finally, I would like to point to this as kind of the positive Orientalist promotions of Tibet, right? As kind of peaceful, heavenly-like a kind of Shangri-La or kind of mystic, harmonious utopias. So this is probably also continue to enforce the narratives of Buddhism as kind of non-violent religions. But when we turn to the realities, we'll find many news stories which is challenges such as Buddhist non-violence images. Let me go to Myanmar first. So many of you probably know this is a Burmese Bin Laden, right? Weather shoes, asserting weather shoes. So this is very, very, he's actually make becomes yeah, remains of years in the in time. So this is another images of the asking the weather shoes. So he's actually is very open spoken in a kind of a very, very institutionalized violence against the Muslims in Myanmar in the names of nationalism. So this is some images. It's always make big news. Yeah. So this is kind of protest staged by the Myanmar monk. If we turn to Sri Lanka, we have a enthusiastic support of Buddhist communities for the brutally efficient elimination campaign against the Tamils insurgencies conducted by the Sri Lanka's government. And the government is constitutionally is bound to foster and protect Buddhism. Right? So you can see that in Sri Lanka, Buddhism also deeply is involved, also rampantly involved in violence against the non-Buddhist religions. So this is also some images, photos that you probably saw somewhere else. Thailand. Since January 2004, the Thai government has also converted Buddhist monastery into military outpost, commissions Buddhist militarist monk, and given support to Buddhist vigilantist squad as a response to the Malay Muslims insurgencies renewed in Thai deep south. Right? So this is also becomes very, very famous over the, since 2004. This is a Thai monk. Yeah, so this is also some images of Buddhist violence. Now we go to Japan. Maybe the most famous violent Buddhist leaders in modern Japan is maybe is Red initialed, right? This is leaders of the a group called the Kasmedan, which is mean the Leagues of Black, right? So this is a very very violent group, and actually. He wrote a book on this book has very shocking titles. It's it means a such, right? So it means that you have very openly promote killing peoples. So this is these leaders. And then we have almost cynicals. This happened 2095. Right? Oh, I believe already 25. It's already 20 years ago. When I was still a student in Japan at the time. I believe that this is also very famous, particularly for people working on any aspect of Japanese Buddhism. And the leaders of this group also claim to be Buddhist believers. Also, some scholars try to argue that maybe this group probably is not so Buddhist, but but I believe that more evidence shows that this group actually must be considered to be a kind of combinations between two traditions. Right? One is maybe Tibetan Buddhism, the other maybe is from a very old Indian religious traditions. So this is the leaders. Yeah. And this is a sense of when this is saline gas attacks happened in Tokyo, right? This is immediately became very, very shocking, very shocking incident at the time. I was in Tokyo. I was in Kyoto at the time. And this is, the lawsuits probably still going on in Japan. And it's very interestingly, this group is now still active in Japan under a different name. Okay, now from the news story, let's go back to Buddhist hack. Let's try to work out why Buddhism sometimes could be related to violence. Actually, when we look at the Buddhist text, we find that not all of them are against the violence. At least for some Chinese Buddhist monk, they believe that sometimes violence is necessary. And maybe a very basic reason for it sanctioning violence or the use of violence is very interesting. It's because of Buddhist ideas about emptiness, shunyata, right? So if you understand everything to be empty, then maybe there's one possible argument is that whenever you come with the killing or murdering, right? Actually, there's no murdering or killing, right? So this is, of course, this is one possible argument. And the other argument is related to Buddhist idea about upaya, which is maybe can be very loosely understood to be skillful meaning. So according to these ideas, what matters is end, right? It's the end, not the mean. So if you have a glorious end, so sometimes you can resort to some virtually, some ethically problematic mean, right? So for example, they believe that if you kill potential murderers in order to save the hundreds of innocents, right? So this is fine. And there's even some very famous Buddhist leaders like Ziyi, who was the de facto founders of a Chinese Buddhist school called Tiantai. So he once claimed that the appearance and natures of evil are the appearance and natures of good. This means that the violence and non-violence, right, they actually from one and the same entities. And Tiantai followers, Zhang Nan, right, he also have a very famous series. So by this series, he tried to assert that the notorious murderers, Angulimala, right? He says, the reason why he can become a Buddhist convert and cleric, just because he displays murders as the Dharma gate, right? By which is to benefit others. So you can see that both of these Tiantai leaders, right, they try to justify violence by some very basic Buddhist teachings. So let me refer to some other case, showing how Buddhist monk sometimes may act as military chaplains and counselors. We have too many examples of starting from like Photo Chen, right, to latest like I'm going to talk about this monk in Ming Dynasty, Yao Guanxiao. So many Buddhist monks were realized as a kind of the military champions and also as counselors. So we can see that the histories of medieval China is replete with examples of Buddhist monks who were involved in warfare as military champions and counselors. So monk was summoned to the battlefield to perform a range of service, right? Including like asserting or semantic ritual, intends to effect the decisive victory and conjuring out the illusions to scare away rival soldiers. So in my book on Fa Zhang, right, I discussed some evidence showing that Fa Zhang, right, these Buddhist leaders, he actually employs some semantic art, try to conjure out some illusions, some images on a battlefield. So in order to have the great Zhou armies to defeat their enemies. So they also, so Buddhist monks was called upon to give lectures about right and wrong, and they converse soldiers by instructing them of life transience, the emptiness of life and death, and training them in practical skills such as the chanting's protective spell. So we have many, many evidence of this. And so you can see that Buddhist monks did go to battlefield, right? To try to help their sponsors to win victories, right? And they use their own Buddhist expertise to do so. So this is images that that's kind of very this is a very famous monk. His secular name is Yao Guanxiao, and he has Dharma name called Daoyan or Daoyan Chansi because he was known as the meditation masters. So Yao Guanxiao became famous because his work for putting this guy, right, Zhu Di, on throne. And Zhu Di, of course, was very famous for his a kind of usurpers, right? Because he was not supposed to be the emperor, but he used some very unusual ways, like a kind of rebellions, right? So he kills his own nephews, Zhu Yuanzhang's grandson, and then declares himself to be the new emperor. So the persons who help him to carry out this series of strategies, series of conspiracies, was exactly this Buddhist monk, Yao Guanxiao, right? So he was people's all agrees that he was actually the mastermind behind a series of schemes, murders, and battles, right? That put Zhu Di to the throne. So this is a kind of a very typical Buddhist counselors for military campaigns or for political infighting. So Buddhist monks sometimes also use, but of course, we also have a Buddhist monk who actually acts as warrior, right? Not only acts as a military advisors. So they arm themselves for different purpose, right? On many occasions, they did so to fight against the rebel and foreign invaders. And in other instances, Buddhist monks took a weapon against the secular powers and that orthodox Buddhism is fought. This means that they sometimes may become the rebel, right? And we have many Buddhist monk warriors, but maybe the most famous is probably the Shaolin monk. So Shaolin monks were believed to play a key role in helping Li Siming, right, to defeat one of his most important rivals. So because of this feat, so Li Siming, right, after he became the emperor, right, reward Shaolin monk, and one reward is giving military titles to Shaolin's leaders, to one of Shaolin's leaders. So for now, related to Shaolin Si, let me mention very briefly about the monastic martial traditions. Here we have images and showing these Buddhist deities are Jinhua in Chinese or Kinnaras in Sanskrit. So these deities holding a staff, right? And scholars like Saha, right, Mayor Saha, believe that these images, and particularly this staff, actually, scepter, actually became the source of inspirations for Shaolin monks' staff, right? So this is some images showing Shaolin monks' accomplishments in the martial art. But Shaolin's temples was by no means the only holy place where the martial art was practiced and fostered. A number of other Buddhist sacred sites were also collected to military training centers in medieval China. Moreover, Italian martial artists were sheltered in a number of other Buddhist temples of a lesser reputation. There's even evidence for the merging of martial art with the ritual and congregational life of the village people. Martial art with collections to the Buddhist traditions like these were at least in part envisioned as a means for spiritual perfection and should therefore be studied as such. Finally, martial art should be studied as another rarely touches arenas in which is different religious traditions interact with each other in a fascinating way. Now, let me turn to another category of Buddhist violence. But maybe this is not pure violence. Maybe this is something that we might call it, this is maybe half violence, or this is about monastic espionage. So also it's less obvious in its connection to violence. Espionage is oftentimes led to bloodshed, and as such it should be studied as another form of expressing violence. As spies, monastic has a number of advantages. These include their local and dynasty-wide network, and their reputations as saintly figures whose outsiders status allows them to serve as the mediators among conflicting parties. This easily turns them into this subject to confide, so it's becoming a uniquely rich source of information. As traditions that across communities, borders, and cultures, Buddhism and Buddhist monks in particular have been recognized as transmitters of religions and cultures across territory. But monastic espionages call for the necessities of addressing the multiple role Buddhist cleric plays in its interactions with local parties and international communities. So I believe that monastic espionages can be carried out through different levels, at least 5 levels. First, between the rival Buddhist group, and second, between the Buddhist group and a non-Buddhist religious group or groups. Right? The third level is between 2 political cliques within a single government. And the fourth level is a politically and militarily hostile regime within a state. And finally, we have, of course, interstate espionage. Right? So in my book, I have different examples for showing all these 5 levels of espionages, monastic espionages. But because of time constraints, I cannot go into the detail. I limit myself to these outstanding examples of a monk spy. So this guy, he was famous for many, many reasons. But maybe one very secular reason is that he was believed to have save the life of young Hitler. Right? He was from from Hungary, from a very rich Jewish family, but then he had many adventures in Europe, in Asia. Right? So he's played multiple roles. So throughout his 64 years life, so he plays at least as an actor, petty thief, convicted forger, Christian missionary, Anglican curate, a Buddhist monk, parliament members, oil tycoon, right? Fugitive, right? Calculators, international spy, advisor to warlord in China, right? So self-proclaimed genius. So he spent about 10 to 15 years, I think, in China, where he ordained himself to be a Buddhist monk. And he actually have a Buddhist, he has a Dharma name, Zhao Kong, which means eliminating emptiness. But even he became a Buddhist monk, people believe that he actually acts as a spy for different parties. And he eventually died in China. But this is a very interesting, very eventful life. I really hope that someone might study, might do a book length studies on these persons, and particularly about the roles he plays as a monk spies. Okay, so finally, let me turn to another very special type of Buddhist violence, and this is we call it the self-immolations. So while we often think of violence as overtly directed, self-inflicted violence often constitutes a worthy object of scholarly attention, especially given that suicide is often an acceptable means for terrorists aiming at ostensibly a religion's goal. In medieval China, Buddhist monks and nuns sacrificed their body in time of war and invasions and during periods of state violence against the Dharma. Doing so constitutes a form of protest against the violence threatening the state or the oppression, or the oppressiveness of a group and a whole sangha to which they belong. Self-inflicted violence or self-immolation further could modify unpleasant manifestations of mass suffering. Right. So this is several two major reasons for self-immolations. So let me show you. Of course, this is very famous, right? Because of Vietnamese war, right? So this is the Vietnamese monk who burned himself alive, right? And to protect the persecution of Buddhism in southern part of Vietnam, right? And this is actually became a kind of icon, a major icon for Vietnamese war. And I believe that we should also study this as kind of Buddhist violence. Also, this is it's not overtly, right? This is inverted. Okay, now very quickly, let me go to some conclusions. Can we talk about Buddhism? In what sense that can we talk about Buddhism and violence? Or can we say that the Buddhism actually, violence is intrinsic to violence? I think maybe this is a kind of misplaced questions, or this is wrong questions actually, because we cannot hastily jump to this kind of conclusive judgment affirming that intrinsic relationships between Buddhism and violence. The questions to be asked is not whether violence is intrinsic to Buddhism, but rather how the religion was abused and misinterpreted by radical individuals and group, right? Because I believe that even we cannot talk about in a very general terms if violence is intrinsic to religions. because we recognize that violence is not a phenomenon unique to Buddhism or unique to any religions. It's better to unpack the questions of whether violence is natural to all religions or to humanity in general. So violence is kind of integral part of human natures, and we cannot completely eradicate it. And that human nature is a history of violence. Maybe we can better spend our time trying to understand ways to curb the manifestations of our violence. So human cultures is born out of our attempt to modify and restrain our violence natures. So this is, I believe that this probably is the right way to understand the relationships between violence and religions. So this is, we need to recognize that constantly, we need to redefine the concept of violence again and again. Then where to seek the fundamental source for the religion's violence? I think that maybe the biggest source is probably is that inherent insatiable desire for religion to expand. And also religions also tend to be institutionalized, right? And this usually results in championing its collective interests as institutions or personal freedoms and individual right. In other words, maybe any religion probably start with something, right? Quite honorable, noble, but little by little, right? They have a collective interests. They become institutionalized, right? So once they become institutionalized, so we see that this becomes a very collective power or collective interests. It's going to overwhelm personal freedoms and individual. The transitions from emphasis on individual freedoms to religious collective interests and power, I believe that was as criterions of institutionalized religious violence. So, of course, religious violence can also be attributed to political abuse of religious powers. Right? When we look at this, is several cases in South Asia, right, where there is this. Okay, let me suggest several solutions to, but of course, this may not be good solutions, but at least we probably can suggest that violence is not inherent to religions or Buddhism in particular. So answers to problems should come from a larger social context, right, from society or secular world. Maybe the first solution is to modernize religions, because this is a process that may assist religions to get rid of fundamentalism, right? And the second is the globalizations, and the third is the secularizations, right? So this is maybe the three things that we might try when the policy makers, right, deal with religion's violence. And for some more specific measures, maybe we should foster more individual freedom and spiritualities, and we may expand the religion's communal role, and maybe we should try to stem the religion's political and hegemonic power, right? So this is, I believe that this is something that we should turn to if we want to deal with religion's violence. So basically, this is my talk. It's very, very general because this is a kind of introductions to my book project. So I cannot go into details. So Yeah. So thank you for your patience. Yeah.